Authored by Michael Snyder via themostimportantnews.com. At one time, the elite at least attempted to conceal their boundless enthusiasm for population control from the general public, but now they aren't even trying to hide it anymore. On Tuesday, an alarming new study that advocates global population control as one of the solutions to the climate emergency that we are facing was published in the journal Bioscience. This document has already been signed by 11,258 scientists from 153 different countries, and it openly calls for a reduction in the human population of our planet. This has always been the endgame for the climate change cult, but now a big push is being made to make the public believe that there is a scientific consensus that this is necessary. You can find a summary of the report here, and I would very much encourage you to read it, because it is essentially a blueprint for where the elite intend to take humanity in the years ahead. But in order to achieve their goals, first they are going to have to convince us that planetary disaster is imminent, and in this study the authors boldly tell us that planet Earth is facing a climate emergency. Scientists have a moral obligation to clearly warn humanity of any catastrophic threat and to tell it like it is. On the basis of this obligation and the graphical indicators presented below, we declare, with more than 11,000 scientist signatories from around the world, clearly and unequivocally that planet Earth is facing a climate emergency. Sounds pretty scary, right? So what solutions are they proposing? Well, the study breaks down the necessary solutions into 6 basic groupings. The letter focuses on 6 key objectives: replacing fossil fuels, cutting pollutants like methane and soot, restoring and protecting ecosystems, eating less meat, converting the economy to one that is carbon-free, and stabilizing population growth. If that sounds a lot like the Green New Deal, that is because it is a lot like the Green New Deal. It is the 6th objective that concerns me the most. Because the truth is that they don't want to just stabilize the global population. According to the study, the population of the Earth really needs to be gradually reduced. Still increasing by roughly 80 million people per year, or more than 200,000 per day. Figure 1AB, the world population must be stabilized, and, ideally, gradually reduced, within a framework that ensures social integrity. There are proven and effective policies that strengthen human rights while lowering fertility rates and lessening the impacts of population growth on GHG emissions and biodiversity loss. These policies make family planning services available to all people, remove barriers to their access, and achieve gender equity, including primary and secondary education as a global norm for all, especially girls and young women. Bongartz and O'Neill, 2018. But if humans are the primary driver of climate change, and if we only have about 12 years before we reach the point of no return, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has suggested, will a gradual reduction of the human population really be enough to satisfy the climate change zealots? For true believers in the cause, there would be no faster way of turning this crisis around than to radically reduce the population of the planet. According to them, every one of us has a carbon footprint, and as the population grows, the climate change crisis only gets worse. So a logical extension of this thinking would be that anyone that can find a way to significantly reduce the global population would literally be saving the planet. To you and I, the idea of millions or billions of people dying is absolutely horrific, but for those that have embraced the climate change narrative, such an outcome would be extremely desirable. And of course, population control has been an obsession among the global elite for a very long time. Way before global warming and climate change were popularized, those at the top end of the social pyramid have been dreaming of dramatically culling the herd. To demonstrate this, I would like to share with you 45 quotes that prove the elite really do want to dramatically reduce the number of people on the planet. 1. Charles Darwin. His thinking is at the foundation of so many of our scientific theories today. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace throughout the world the savage races. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes, as Professor Schaffhausen has remarked, will no doubt be exterminated. The break will then be rendered wider, for it will intervene between man in a more civilized state, as we may hope, than the Caucasian and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as at present between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. 2. Bill Gates. The problem is that the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. And we've got to make sure that we help out with the tools now so that they don't have an impossible situation later. 3. Bernie Sanders. In poor countries around the world where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, is something I very, very strongly support. 4. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The primary challenge facing our species is the reproduction of our species itself. It is time we had a grown-up discussion about the optimum quantity of human beings in this country and on this planet. All the evidence shows that we can help reduce population growth and world poverty by promoting literacy and female emancipation and access to birth control. 5. UK television presenter Sir David Attenborough. The human population can no longer be allowed to grow in the same old uncontrolled way. If we do not take charge of our population size, then nature will do it for us. 6. Paul Ehrlich, a former science advisor to President George W. Bush and the author of The Population Bomb. Solving the population problem is not going to solve the problems of racism, of religious intolerance, of war, of gross economic inequality. But if you don't solve the population problem, you're not going to solve any of those problems. Whatever problem you're interested in, you're not going to solve it unless you also solve the population problem. 7. Dave Foreman, the co-founder of Earth First. We humans have become a disease, the humanpox. 8. CNN founder Ted Turner. A total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels, would be ideal. 9. Japan's Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso. About medical patients with serious illnesses. You cannot sleep well when you think it's all paid by the government. This won't be solved unless you let them hurry up and die. 10. David Rockefeller. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. 11. Richard Branson. The truth is this: the Earth cannot provide enough food and fresh water for 10 billion people, never mind homes, never mind roads, hospitals and schools. 12. Environmental activist Roger Martin. On a finite planet, the optimum population providing the best quality of life for all, is clearly much smaller than the maximum, permitting their survival. The more we are, the less for each. Fewer people mean better lives. 13. HBO personality Bill Maher. I'm pro-choice. I'm for assisted suicide. I'm for regular suicide. I'm for whatever gets the freeway moving. That's what I'm for. It's too crowded. The planet is too crowded and we need to promote death. 14. Al Gore. One of the things we could do about it is to change the technologies, to put out less of this pollution, to stabilize the population, and one of the principal ways of doing that is to empower and educate girls and women. You have to have ubiquitous availability of fertility management so women can choose how many children to have, the spacing of the children. You have to educate girls and empower women. And that's the most powerful leveraging factor, and when that happens, then the population begins to stabilize and societies begin to make better choices and more balanced choices. 15. MIT professor Penny Chisholm. The real trick is, in terms of trying to level off at someplace lower than that 9 billion, is to get the birth rates in the developing countries to drop as fast as we can. And that will determine the level at which humans will level off on Earth. 16. Julia Whitty, a columnist for Mother Jones. The only known solution to ecological overshoot is to decelerate our population growth faster than it's decelerating now and eventually reverse it. At the same time, we slow and eventually reverse the rate at which we consume the planet's resources. Success in these twin endeavors will our most pressing global issues: climate change, food scarcity, water supplies, immigration, healthcare, biodiversity loss, even war. On one front, we've already made unprecedented strides, reducing global fertility from an average 4.92 children per woman in 1950 to 2.56 today, an accomplishment of trial and sometimes brutally coercive error, but also a result of one woman at a time making her individual choices. The speed of this childbearing revolution, swimming hard against biological programming, rates as perhaps our greatest collective feat to date. 17. Colorado State University professor Philip Caffaro in a paper entitled Climate Ethics and Population Policy, Ending Human Population Growth is almost certainly a necessary, but not sufficient, condition for preventing catastrophic global climate change. Indeed, significantly reducing current human numbers may be necessary in order to do so. 18. Professor of Biology at the University of Texas at Austin Eric R. Pianka, I have 2 grandchildren and I want them to inherit a stable Earth. But I fear for them. Humans have overpopulated the Earth and in the process have created an ideal nutritional substrate on which bacteria, viruses, microbes will grow and prosper. We are behaving like bacteria growing on an agar plate, flourishing until natural limits are reached, or until another microbe colonizes and takes over, using them as their resource. In addition to our extremely high population density, we are social and mobile, exactly the conditions that favor growth and spread of pathogenic, disease-causing microbes. I believe it is only a matter of time until microbes once again assert control over our population, since we are unwilling to control it ourselves. This idea has been espoused by ecologists for at least 4 decades and is nothing new. People just don't want to hear it. 19. Kofi Annan, UN Secretary-General from 1997 to 2006. The idea that population growth guarantees a better life, financially or otherwise, is a myth that only those who sell nappies, prams and the like have any right to believe. 20. Thuraya Ahmed Obaid, UN Undersecretary-General from 2000 to 2010. We cannot confront the massive challenges of poverty, hunger, disease and environmental destruction unless we address issues of population and reproductive health. 21. Bill Nye, in 1750, there were about 1 billion humans in the world. Now, there are well over 7 billion people in the world. It more than doubled in my lifetime. So all these people trying to live the way we live in the developed world is filling the atmosphere with a great deal more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases than existed a couple of centuries ago. It's the speed at which it is changing that is going to be troublesome for so many large populations of humans around the world. 22. Actress Cameron Diaz, I think women are afraid to say that they don't want children, because they're going to get shunned. But I think that's changing too now. I have more girlfriends who don't have kids than those that do. And, honestly, we don't need any more kids. We have plenty of people on this planet. 23. Democrat strategist Stephen Ratner, we need death panels. Well, maybe not death panels, exactly, but unless we start allocating healthcare resources more prudently, rationing, by its proper name, the exploding cost of Medicare will swamp the federal budget. 24. Matthew Iglesias, a business and economics correspondent for Slate, in an article entitled, The Case for Death Panels, in one chart. But not only is this healthcare spending on the elderly the key issue in the federal budget, our disproportionate allocation of healthcare dollars to old people surely accounts for the remarkable lack of apparent cost-effectiveness of the American healthcare system. When the patient is already over 80, the simple fact of the matter is that no amount of treatment is going to work miracles in terms of life expectancy or quality of life. 25. Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger, all of our problems are the result of overbreeding among the working class. 26. Gloria Steinem, everybody with a womb doesn't have to have a child any more than everybody with vocal cords has to be an opera singer. 27. Jane Goodall, it's our population growth that underlies just about every single one of the problems that we've inflicted on the planet. If there were just a few of us, then the nasty things we do wouldn't really matter and Mother Nature would take care of it, but there are so many of us. 28. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, frankly I had thought that at the time Roe was decided, there was concern about population growth and particularly growth in populations that we don't want to have too many of. 29. Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger, the most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. 30. Salon columnist Mary Elizabeth Williams in an article entitled, So What If Abortion Ends Life? All life is not equal. That's a difficult thing for liberals like me to talk about, lest we wind up looking like death panel loving, kill your grandma and your precious baby stormtroopers. Yet a fetus can be a human life without having the same rights as the woman in whose body it resides. 31. Paul Ehrlich. Basically, then, there are only two kinds of solutions to the population problem. One is a birth rate solution, in which we find ways to lower the birth rate. The other is a death rate solution, in which ways to raise the death rate. War, famine, pestilence, find us. 32. Alberto Giubilini of Monash University in Melbourne, Australia and Francesca Minerva of the University of Melbourne in a paper published in the Journal of Medical Ethics. Hence circumstances occur after birth such that they would have justified abortion. What we call afterbirth abortion should be permissible. He proposed to call this practice after-birth abortion, rather than infanticide, to emphasize that the moral status of the individual killed is comparable with that of a fetus, rather than to that of a child. Therefore, we claim that killing a newborn could be ethically permissible in all the circumstances where abortion would be. Such circumstances include cases where the newborn has the potential to have an at least acceptable life but the well-being of the family is at risk. 33. Nina Fedorov, a key advisor to Hillary Clinton. We need to continue to decrease the growth rate of the global population. The planet can't support many more people. 34. Barack Obama's primary science advisor, John Holdren. A program of sterilizing women after their second or third child, despite the relatively greater difficulty of the operation than vasectomy, might be easier to implement than trying to sterilize men. 35. Another quote from John Holdren: if population control measures are not initiated immediately and effectively, all the technology man can bring to bear will not fend off the misery to come. 36. David Brower, the first executive director of the Sierra Club. Childbearing should be a punishable crime against society. Unless the parents hold a government license, all potential parents should be required to use contraceptive chemicals, the government issuing antidotes to citizens chosen for childbearing. 37. Maurice Strong, either we reduce the world's population voluntarily or nature will do this for us, but brutally. 38. Thomas Ferguson, former official in the U.S. State Department Office of Population Affairs. There is a single theme behind all our work: we must reduce population levels. Either governments do it our way, through nice clean methods, or they will get the kinds of mess that we have in El Salvador, or in Iran or in Beirut. Population is a political problem. Once population is out of control, it requires authoritarian government, even fascism, to reduce it. 39. Mikhail Gorbachev, we must speak more clearly about equality, contraception, about abortion, about values that control population, because the ecological crisis, in short, it is the population crisis. Cut the population by 90% and there aren't enough people left to do a great deal of ecological damage. 40. Jacques Cousteau, in order to stabilize world population, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day. It is a horrible thing to say, but it is just as bad not to say it. 41. Finnish environmentalist Pentti Linkola, if there were a button I could press, I would sacrifice myself without hesitating if it meant millions of people would die. 42. Author Dan Brown, overpopulation is an issue so profound that all of us need to ask what should be done. 43. Prince Philip, husband of Queen Elizabeth II and co-founder of the World Wildlife Fund. In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus, in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. 44. Ashley Judd, it's unconscionable to breed with the number of children who are starving to death in impoverished countries. 45. Charles Darwin, with savages, the weak in body or mind are soon eliminated, and those that survive commonly exhibit a vigorous state of health. We civilized men, on the other hand, do our utmost to check the process of elimination. We build asylums for the imbecile, the maimed, and the sick. We institute poor laws, and our medical men exert their utmost skill to save the life of everyone to the last moment. There is reason to believe that vaccination has preserved thousands, who from a weak constitution would formerly have succumbed to smallpox. Thus the weak member